Before we get started, I'd like to ask Mr. Jeff Averitt, if he would, to get his pastors here to give an invocation. But before we do that, I think Mr. Leighton Ricks has something he wants to say real quick regarding an issue in the parish.
Well, some of you may know and some of you may not know, but former District 2 Councilman Jim Norred, wife Linda passed away this morning from leukemia. It was sudden onset about 3 months ago. And so I would just like to ask the pastor and like to ask all of you, if you would, please say a prayer for Jim and his family. This is certainly a tough time for him, one that we can't imagine unless we've been there and go through that. Also, real quickly, Mayor Darrell Jones is in the hospital in New Orleans with pneumonia, so please keep him in your prayers as well. He's got a serious battle ahead of him.
Thank you, Mr. Ricks. Mr. Jeff Averitt?
At the end of this, Mr. Bill, Brother Bill Holyfield, Carry Up Baptist Church.
Can we get rise for our invocation?
Father, we thank you for this opportunity that we have this evening to gather in this place and to conduct the business of this parish. But Father, we know that without your leadership and your guidance, that truly, Father, we would falter and fail at all attempts to do anything. So we come to you tonight, Father, asking that you would lead us and guide us and direct us and pour out your wisdom, and that these men, Father, who have been elected to represent us, would truly, Father, not lean to their own understanding, but in all ways seek your leadership and your guidance, because we know in you is all perfection and all holiness and all righteousness. And we thank you, Father, that we can come to you tonight and bring these needs that President Leighton Ricks has brought to our attention. We ask your healing hand to be upon the mayor. We ask, Father, for you to comfort this family who has lost this wife and mother. And we ask, Father, now that you would just bless us as we seek, Father, to serve you. And we'll give you praise and glory and honor in and through the name of Christ, in whom eternal life is offered.
Thank you, Jesus.
Amen.
Amen. Just face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Miss Sandy, would you be so kind as to call the roll to have a quorum? This is a Livingston Parish Council meeting, March the 24th. All notices have been sent out. Public advertisements have been made that are required by law. So, Miss Sandy, if you'd call the roll to constitute a quorum, please.
Mr. Talbert?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Here.
Mr. Ard?
Here.
Mr. Mack?
Here.
Mr. Averitt?
Here.
Mr. Liddell?
Here.
Mr. Wascom?
Here, just a friendly reminder, you might want to take a moment, and if you hadn't thought about your cell phones, just take just a minute and think about that. Also, we will have public input available on each item as they come up, the ones that are required. If you haven't here to speak, if you are here to speak on a specific item, please try your best to limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. We have a long agenda, 2 meetings combined into one tonight, so thanks again for that. The first item, I'm going to ask that we change the agenda up a little bit. Let's go ahead and get Parish President Leighton Ricks to talk about a proclamation for autism.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is just a proclamation announcing that April is Autism Awareness Month. I have Miss Jamie Tyndall here with Helping Families. I'm going to ask her to come up and do a little brief explanation. I have a proclamation signed here for her. I won't read it for the sake of time, but I would like to present it to Miss Jamie.
That's for you.
Yeah, that's for me. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Parish President Ricks, and thank you, Council. We appreciate it very much. My name's Jamie Tyndall. I'm with Families Helping Families of Greater Baton Rouge. We're a nonprofit of family members that serve people with disabilities. We're all staffed by parents of children with disabilities that work there, but we offer resources, information, education, and training. That's my 30-second spill on who we are. We serve many, many families in Livingston Parish and we never charge families for anything that we offer them with support. But we're here today to proclaim April as Autism Awareness Month. And I'm very proud. I'm a resident of Livingston Parish, so to have the council and the parish recognize April as Autism Awareness Month is very near and dear to my heart. We have a huge event. Is this my board? Yeah. We have a big event, April 30th on the grounds of the State Police. It's our only fundraiser that fully funds the program, the Resource Center for Autism Spectrum Disorders at our center. And Linda is going to talk a little bit about what we've done to help her. But come out on that day. It's a 5K. There's a walk, which I'll be doing afterwards. Joining in the walk. If you're runners, please join us. But it's a huge family fun event. And you can go to our website and join. But we're mainly very, very grateful to have the parish recognize autism. It now affects 1 in 68 people will have autism. And they are very, very soon, it's going to be 1 in 45. There's a governmental study that's already showing 1 in 45, so it's a lot more prevalent than it used to be. But it's nothing to be afraid of, and that's what we're here for, to bring awareness, acceptance, and inclusion of those affected by autism. But more importantly is a mom or grandmother who's actually been affected by autism personally. So thank you, Linda.
Good evening. My name is Linda Gardner. I am a grandmother of a grandson that's autistic, and I just wanted to let the council know and the people of Livingston Parish know how much the Families Helping Families has helped me with advocating for my child that he gets the best education possible. They have come to IEP meetings, which are individual education plans. They have worked numerous hours on my behalf and my grandson's behalf. He's here today, but he's really shy, and he said he's very feared right now. But he brought all his little animals with him. But he's here with us today. But he's at Albany Upper Elementary, and they're a really, really great school. I love Livingston Parish Schools. He's been in Livingston Parish Schools since he was in pre-K. He was able to get in there, you know, because he did have a disability. And I'm just so thankful for Families Helping Families. They give back so much to the community, and they help families like myself that don't know where to turn. You know, and because a lot of times teachers don't understand either. So when they come in and advocate for the family, then the teachers are more educated so they can understand more about the child and what their needs are. And I'm grateful. And then once a year, they have a Thanksgiving celebration that if any of you could ever volunteer for, they serve over 300 or 400 disadvantaged children and adults, and it's wonderful to be able to serve all of these people. So not only do they give back, you know, to us as parents, but they give back to the community. So it's a great organization, and I've went to a lot of their runs and walks. I don't run, but I'll walk. And my company usually supports that too. So I'm grateful for each of you today and for letting me have the time to talk to you about how important it is for a parent to be able to have an organization like Families Helping Families to be an advocate for us.
Thank you, Ms. Linda. I believe that you still want to do a quick photo?
Really would.
I tell you what, let's do. Let's go ahead and I'd like to, if we'll get a motion for a proclamation, not the resolution, for proclamation to make March autism April. Autism for.
We don't need a resolution. We're just presenting it. I've already.
So you don't need a.
We don't need a resolution.
He's proclaimed it.
I proclaim it.
So let it be written.
Yeah. I mean, we could do a motion on everybody.
Move the placard toward the please.
Say peace.
That's what I like to see.
But that was my bad side.
Lord have mercy.
Sandy, what item is Delmas, Jared, items? Yeah. With the council's permission, what I'd like to do is bring up item 17 real quick. Again, we have some members in the audience or on the agenda that are in a hurry. Item number 17 is the Livingston Parish Registrar of Voters. I'd asked this to be put on the agenda. Mr. Delmas Taylor has served in that office for a long time and has sent a letter that he would like Ms. Sandy to read.
With a heavy heart. Dear members of the Livingston Parish Council, this letter is my official notification to you that my last day of employment as Livingston Parish Registrar of Voters will be Wednesday, March 23rd, 2016. On that day, I will retire. I'm excited about my impending retirement, but wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all for the opportunities that I have experienced as Registrar of Voters for Livingston Parish. I've genuinely enjoyed my employment as Registrar and will miss my coworkers when retirement day comes. I plan to work right up until my retirement date and will be happy to help make a smooth transition. Again, I truly enjoyed being Registrar of Voters for Livingston Parish and will miss my workplace and coworkers a great deal. Please feel free to contact me if you need any additional information. Sincerely, Delmas L. Taylor.
He served for a long time, but since he was appointed to the Registrar of Voters as a lifetime appointed, he was appointed by the police jury. There needs to be a motion and an act of this board to accept his resignation. Motion by Mr. Jeff Averett, seconded by Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse. Any discussion? Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Since that office is now vacant, do you think we might find a motion from this board on a nomination and an appointment?
Yes. I'd like to appoint Jared Andrews.
Mr. Jared Andrews to the Registrar of Voters for Livingston Parish, seconded by Mr. Scooter King. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Mr. Jared Andrews is in the audience tonight, and I know he's worked hard in that office for a long time. Congratulations, Mr. Andrews. Be ready to come give a speech to the parish council in the coming months about your plans for the Livingston Parish.
You may want to talk about early voting.
Oh, well, and we have early voting, I think, coming up this Saturday, correct? And we also have some other items on the agenda we'll talk about that time, but thank you so much, Jared. Pardon? Let's go to, item 7. This is under a public hearing for a quitclaim deed for Glenn LeBlanc, the Saint Marie property. Sam, was you here to speak on this one? No. Not so. That's okay. What this is to call for to hold a public hearing. No, we actually have to hold a public hearing now.
Open the public hearing.
I hereby declare a public hearing open for quitclaim deed for Glenn LeBlanc, Saint Marie property. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, raise your hand. None being?
I'll read it by title.
Read by title, Ms. Sam.
Okay. This is for proposed ordinance LP 16-02. This is a map showing re-subdivision of tract A1C and A1B of a certain 7-acre and 2.6-acre tract of land into tracts A1C1 and A1B1, and the revocation of a 40-foot servitude of access across a portion of tracts A1C1 and A1B1 located in Section 4, T8S R3E, Greensburg Land District, Livingston Parish, Louisiana, for Glenn LeBlanc, being more particularly described herein.
I now charge that the public hearing is closed with none being to speak for or against it, but we need a a motion to adopt the ordinance.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ard. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Next, item B is to open and hold a public hearing for sewer district number 2 boundary amendment. Ms. Carmen Levine is here, I believe, to speak on this, but I hereby declare a public hearing open. If there's anyone in the audience to speak for or against it, please speak now. None being, Ms. Sandy, would you read it by title?
Okay. This is proposed ordinance 16-03, an ordinance amending the boundaries of Sewerage District 2 of Livingston Parish, Louisiana, and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
Yes, Mr. Gerald Burns, please.
My name is Gerald Burns, and I do serve on Sewer District Number 1 Board of Supervisors. I want to point out that the board, District 1 and 2, in our meeting passed unanimously a resolution of support for the mergers of District 1 and District 2. Mr. Harris and Mr. Talbot and Mr. King was at that meeting, and we totally support the move. But I had a question, I guess, to the legal counsel. A question came up in our last board meeting about this particular ordinance and needed an answer. That according to the Home Rule Charter, that once this ordinance is enacted tonight, and I understand the parish president signs it and then it's advertised in the local official journal, that 15 days after the expiration, this becomes law. Is that correct? This ordinance is final 15 days after the advertisement in the official journal or after tonight? When does that 15-day period end?
After adoption and execution by the parish president and that's when it becomes final.
Jerry, we've already done the advertising. This thing was
No.
introduced, this was 2 meetings ago, and so the advertisement's been done.
But that's not the question. The question that some of the, come out of the board meeting was an issue on appeal rights, that some people were worried about the fact that someone could appeal this, and what avenues, how can anybody appeal this ordinance, and what grounds?
I think I understand your question. There's no appeal from an adoption of an ordinance. Someone could challenge the validity of an ordinance by litigation, which in case they could say we didn't adopt it in the right form, it wasn't advertised correctly, et cetera, or it's unconstitutional or violation of some other state law. So that could be filed really at any time.
On any ordinance, not
On any
just this ordinance?
Challenge the validity
So
of
it
any
would be a
ordinance.
technical reason, period, that's it.
It could be adopted for legal or technical reasons, can be challenged really at any time. So,
Yeah. Well, that question came up in the board meeting, and they were asked for direction, to
Yeah.
make sure we didn't have a problem here.
yeah, the
So
delay you're
that's
talking
some-
about is 15 days after adoption becomes final.
And that is after the parish president signs it, or after it appears in the official journal?
Within the our charter provides that with the final approval of ordinances by the president or council, unless there's a veto, every enacted ordinance, unless it shall specify another date, shall become effective at the expiration of 15 days after the final adoption.
And that would be tonight?
No,
Well, if it gets adopted.
we adopt tonight, 15 days from tonight.
From tonight?
From tonight.
From today. Okay, that's good.
All right,
Start counting tomorrow.
15 days after, right.
Okay, Good Friday? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Ms. Sandy, have you read this one? Yeah, we did read this. So just a motion to adopt by Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Gary Talbert. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Item D, adjudicated property. Did we have any, was you here to speak on this one?
See.
I'm sorry, C, adjudicated property. Again, we've already called for the public hearing, so this will have a public hearing tonight. I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone to speak for or against the assessment number 086819? I hereby close the public hearing. Ms. Sandy, would you read the title?
This is proposed ordinance 16-04, an ordinance authorizing the Livingston Parish Council to declare certain adjudicated property surplus and authorize the sale of said property to James L. Morrow, his agent or assigns, for the minimum price of $2,525 and no cents, being more than 2/3 of the appraised value, or to any party bidding a higher price at public sale held on April 18, 2016, as provided in the public notice dated March 17, 2016, and which property is described as follows.
Public hearing now being closed. Is there a motion to adopt this ordinance, resolution?
Ordinance.
Ordinance. Motion by Mr. Ard, second by Mr. Growling-House. Any discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard made the motion, Mr.
I'm
Girlinghouse
sorry,
made the
Mr.
second.
Ard made the motion, Mr. Growling-House second.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Item D, I hereby declare a public hearing being held for adjudicated property assessment number 287953. Any discussion, pro or against? None being. Ms. Sandy, you want to read it by title?
Did you open it? I'm sorry.
I hereby declare the public hearing open. Anyone to speak for or against?
Mr. Mumfree?
I did.
Mr. Mumfree was here earlier, but I believe he spoke with Mr. Day. Okay, good. This is proposed ordinance 16-05, an ordinance authorizing the Livingston Parish Council to declare certain adjudicated property surplus and to authorize the sale of said property to Craig Mumfree, his agent or assigns, for the price of $7,000 and no cents, and which property is described as follows.
Public hearing is now closed. Just a motion to adopt the ordinance.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse, second by Mr. Mack. Any discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Item E, I hereby declare a public hearing open for adjudicated property assessment number 292441, Ward 4T. Any discussion for or against? None being. I hereby close the public hearing. Ms. Sandy, would you read the title?
This is proposed ordinance 16-06, an ordinance authorizing the Livingston Parish Council to declare certain adjudicated property surplus and to authorize the sale of said property to Melvin Wild, his agent or assigns, for the price of $2,201 and no cents, and which property is described as follows.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Far away.
Jennifer, all this money from these adjudicated properties goes to the animal shelter?
The portion that we get to keep goes to the animal shelter, yes, sir.
Okay. So, the portion, what portion do we not get to keep?
Don't quote me on this, but I believe we get 2/3 of whatever we get, and the sheriff gets 1/3, or it may be vice versa, to settle the property tax and close out whatever they get, whatever we get goes down.
Okay, so any revenue that we receive from adjudicated property goes is dedicated to animal shelter?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Item 8 is a presentation by the Florida Parish's Juvenile Justice.
Did we get the motion on
We
that?
gotta get a motion, a second.
I thought we,
I
okay,
asked the
It's
question.
okay.
okay.
Gary interrupted.
I'll move.
Make a motion to adopt the ordinance for adjudicated property 292441. Motion by second by Mr. Shane Mack. Call for the vote, Sandy.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Item 8, presentation by the Florida Parish's Juvenile Justice District proposition for the April 9th, 2016 election. Is there anyone here? Mr. Joseph Dominique, would you take just a moment and tell us your thoughts on this upcoming election?
Thank you.
Thank you for having me tonight. My name is Joseph Dominic. I'm the Executive Director for the Florida Parish's Juvenile Detention Center. Although I am newly appointed as of last week, I've been an employee of the detention center for 20 years. I'm a lifelong resident of Tangipahoa Parish, and I'm also a past resident of Livingston Parish. I'm here tonight to pass out some information regarding the Juvenile Detention Center and the upcoming millage tax. I've passed that out to you. I also have enough copies for people in the audience. If anybody would like a copy, they can raise their hands. Beginning real quick, last year we took in right at 748 juveniles. 119 of those came from Livingston Parish. These are not kids that are skipping school. These are not kids who stole a pack of bubble gum. These are kids who have been accused of crimes such as murder, rape, armed robbery, vehicular homicide, you name it. We've got kids in the detention center right now that have been accused of these crimes. I want to say that our program is nationally recognized. You have a gem of a juvenile detention center in your backyard. And I say that because out of 580 juvenile detention centers in the country, only a handful of them do business the way that we do. Our model is designed to change criminal thinking. We teach over 182 social skills to our youth, and these are simple things as how to shake hands with somebody, how to disagree appropriately. These are some of the things that we put in their tool belt for when they return back to the community. And by doing that, and by running a model like that, we reduce the likelihood of them reoffending. And when we reduce the likelihood of them reoffending, then that is what ultimately keeps them from getting back into the criminal justice system, and that is ultimately what saves taxpayer dollars. Out of the 580 juvenile detention centers in the country, only a handful of them, again, do business the way that we do. And that's because it's difficult work. All we're required to do is house kids, give them 3 meals a day, give them a shower, give them clean clothes, and make sure they're available for court and keep the public safe. But as I stated, we do so much more than that. From a public safety issue, if this tax were not to pass, the juvenile detention center will more than likely have to close its doors. We are a regional juvenile detention center, so we provide placement for St. Tammany Parish, Livingston Parish, St. Helena, Washington, and Tangipahoa, the 5 parishes. We do not take kids from outside of our parishes, just as the other 13 detention centers in the state of Louisiana do not take kids from outside their parishes. So if the center were to close, law enforcement and the judiciary would not have a place to put kids. And as I stated, these are kids that have been accused of committing the same crimes that adults do. So in closing, I would ask that this board consider adopting a resolution of support for the detention center and the initiative that I brought before you. And if you have any questions, I can answer them at this time.
No questions? If not, and the election is coming up April the 9th,
Yes, sir.
and early voting would start
This weekend.
Okay, is there a motion from the board to adopt a resolution?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse,
I'll second it.
second by Mr. Talbot. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dominic. Item 9 is an adoption of minutes for the February 25th, 2016 regular meeting of the Parish Council. A motion would be in order to adopt
I'll
those.
make a motion to
Motion by
adopt.
Mr. Gary Talbot,
No, second.
second by Mr. Harris. Any discussion? Ms. Sandy, call for the vote.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Item 10, Livingston Parish Office of Motor Vehicles Refunding Bonds. This was requested by Mr. Jim Ryan. First will be the adoption of a resolution granting preliminary authority, but I'm going to let Mr. Ryan take the floor here.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. Again, we've discussed this before. This is a refund of your current bond issue. We're not stretching out the maturities. It's simply lowering the interest rate. It's the same process we've been doing now for about a month.
Thank you. Motion to adopt the resolution.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse, second by Mr. Jeff Aver. Any discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. The next item is the introduction of an ordinance for the same thing. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Can you explain why there's a need for a resolution and an ordinance as they're separate?
The resolution, you make application to the state bond commission, hire professionals, et cetera, et cetera. The ordinance is going to be the bond ordinance where the legality of lowering the interest on the bonds actually takes place. As you know, a resolution is not a legally binding document. So the resolution kind of sets the thing in motion, makes us move forward with it, hires professionals, makes the application, the bond commission tells us to proceed. The ordinance is something that's actually going to, by force of law, lower the interest rate on your bonds.
Okay.
You always do that, even in Denham Springs, you're always going to do a
Sure.
resolution, intro, and then adopt an ordinance.
I believe this needs to be read by title, so Ms. Sandy, would you read it by title, please?
This is an introduction of an ordinance. It'll be proposed ordinance 16-07, an ordinance authorizing the incurrence of debt and issuance of not exceeding $4,450,000 revenue refunding bonds, Series 2016 of the Parish of Livingston, State of Louisiana, prescribing the form, terms, and conditions of said bonds, designating the date, domination, and place of payment of said bonds, providing for the payment thereof in principal and interest, and providing for other matters related thereto. Public hearing will be April the 14th at 6 p.m.
All right, this would be a motion to authorize an introduction of an ordinance and I guess call for public hearing. So is there a motion from the board?
I'll move to introduce the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Talbot,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Tableau. Any discussion? Call the vote.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Item 11, adopt a resolution to approve a petition filed by the Juban Trails Development LLC concerning the creation of Juban Trails Community Development District. Mr. Beecham and Mr. Jim Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Pat Beecham with McGlinchey Stafford, who, for the fact that my dear friend Carmen Laverne was not sitting in the audience, I would say Pat is the best CDD lawyer in the state, but I'll say he is the co-best with Mr. Laverne from Butler Snow. Both are politicians. Both dear longtime friends of mine. I'll grab it real quick. I know you're busy. I was having a conversation with Mr. Tyler about this project earlier. I just want to make this clear. I'm not an advocate or a proponent or opposed to this project. I'm here as your financial advisor telling you what bonds and blah, 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 blah. Mr. Beecham, I believe, is bond counsel on this project?
Yes.
So he can probably speak to any particulars about the project better than I can. I can tell you what a CDD is, how it works, what you're doing, blah, 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 but when it gets down to the nuts and bolts of this project, I'm going to defer to Mr. Beecham to the specifics of this project.
You just coined the phrase co-best.
Co-best. And I'm sure the two best wordsmiths in this room could probably come up with a better word than that, but I'll leave it there.
No, co-best works.
So you need a resolution authorizing the creation of the district?
Yes, so
Yeah.
this is very similar, again, I'll try to be brief, Mr. Chairman. A CDD is simply a mechanism that allows a developer to finance his infrastructure with tax-exempt bond financing, which is a lower interest rate. It's usually 2 or 3% lower than a bank loan. And the reason for that, the IRS allows that in our IRS code. The reason they allow that is because eventually, most of that infrastructure is eventually turned over anyway to the public, the roads, the sewer, the water. So if the parish had gone and financed the water, the sewer, the roads, et cetera, they would have had the option of financing that with tax-exempt bonds. The IRS code allows the developers to create a community development district, set it up, issue tax-exempt bonds to pay for portions of their infrastructure costs. You've done this before. I think there are 8 or 9, Carmen, Pat, help me, 8 or 9 CDDs in the parish.
Livingston's has more than any other parish.
This isn't something you haven't done before. I'll give you probably the 2 best examples are Carter Plantation and Greystone Golf Country Club are both community development districts that I believe Mr. Beecham formed and worked on, didn't he?
Yes.
Yes.
And they both turned out fantastic, so. Is there a motion from the board?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse to adopt a resolution, second by Mr. Ard. Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse. Any discussion? Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Beecham?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Mr. Beecham, before you sit down, and if councils don't mind, if we could skip to item number 20, which I believe has been resolved already, but while you're here, you might want to help us on that one as well.
That's a CDD that Pat and I created back in 2009, I think.
Yes.
for Carter Plantation. It was going to be an expansion of the Carter Plantation Community Development District. The bond market fell apart, the housing market fell apart at about the time we created that district. Nothing's ever become of that. There is some property in the district. We would like to dissolve the district, and then we're going to ask that we adjudicate the property and turn it over to the parish. Is that correct, Mr.
That's
Beecham?
right. It's surplus.
So what we need is a motion to adopt an ordinance that dissolves Carter Marina Community. All right, is there a motion from the board?
I'll make that.
Motion by Mr. Lobel, second by Mr. Jeff Avery. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
You gotta
Read by title, please, Ms. Sandy.
Okay, this will be proposed ordinance 1608. This is an ordinance dissolving Carter Marina Community Development District within the parish of Livingston, State of Louisiana, in compliance with the provision of Chapter 27-B, Title 33 of the Louisiana Revised Statutes of 1950, as amended, Louisiana Revised Statute 33909, 39.11 to 33903, 9.37 inclusive. The public hearing will be April the 14th at 6 p.m.
We had a motion and a second. Ms. Sandy's read it out loud. I think the motion was Mr. Lobel,
Okay,
second
I
by
got
Mr. Avery. Did you want to say something, Mr. Avery? Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Thank you,
Ms.
Mr.
Sandy?
Chairman.
We need to lift the agenda, if it pleases the council, to introduce an ordinance for Juban Trails.
Oh, okay, absolutely. Before you get out of here then.
Wait, okay. Is there a time-sensitive matter for us to lift the agenda to do this?
Yes.
Yes, it's
Yes.
very time sensitive with the market. It takes a whole process to get a district organized, and until the district's organized, it slows down the bond issuance process, because you've got to have a district created and in existence to get your bond process rolling. If we don't do this, we could lose a month, 6 weeks, and in this market, you never know what'll happen.
Okay.
And what we need on this to lift the agenda, it would need to be a motion and a second, but it would need to pass unanimously.
Gary?
Can I just say something?
Sure, Ms. Sandy.
Mr. Ryan and Mr. Beecham submitted everything they were supposed to submit in a timely manner to get on the agenda, and the day before the agenda went out, they didn't think they would have all the proper documentation in place and they would have everything. And then he called at the last hour and said, "We have it, can we please be put on the agenda? It's so time sensitive," and I let it go,
Okay.
because it was originally.
I just was trying to figure out maybe if there was some reason we were lifting the agenda.
And when we were talking about how it needed to be worded, we only put the petition and the resolution, and we were such in a rush, we didn't put the ordinance.
Okay, that's fine.
To be clear, Mr. Talbot, Councilman Talbot, and, you know, I guess, is there an imminent urgency? No, because we don't know what interest rates are going to do. And I believe what my colleague, Mr. Beecham, is saying is if rates go up, and I presume you're trying to get on the bond commission for next month?
Yeah.
So if we don't introduce tonight, they make the bond commission, rates go up significantly in 6 months, it might mean less profit for the developer. If rates stay the same or low, then there is, in fact, no urgency to get on the agenda.
I understand. I was just curious.
Motion by Mr. Jeff Avery to lift the agenda and add this to it. Second by Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse. In discussion, call for the vote, Ms. Sandy.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Now, do we need to
Introduce.
introduce an ordinance? Likewise, okay. So a
Please.
motion to adopt it in an ordinance, or to call for public hearing?
No, we're just going to introduce it tonight.
This will be to introduce it
And
and
call for
set
the public hearing then?
Yeah.
Okay, this will be proposed ordinance 16-09. This is an ordinance creating the Juban Trails Community Development District within the parish of Livingston, State of Louisiana, and further describing the boundaries thereof, and further appointing a board of supervisors consisting of 5 members to govern and manage said community development district, and providing for certain other related matters, all in compliance with the provisions of Chapter 27-B, Title 33 of the Louisiana Revised Statutes of 1950, as amended and inclusive. The public hearing will be held on April 14th at 6 p.m.
All right, do we have, I think, who's the motion? I don't forgot now. Or do we have one?
We had a motion.
Motion to adopt the ordinance.
No, to introduce it.
I mean, introduce the ordinance, and at that time, call for the public hearing.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse, second by Mr. Scooter King. Any discussion, call for the vote, Ms. Amy.
Mr. Talbert.
Yes.
Mr. King. Yes. Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse.
Yes.
Mr. Ard.
Yes.
Mr. Mack.
Yes.
Mr. Averett.
Yes.
Mr. Lobel.
Yes.
Mr. Wascom.
Yes.
Vote to go back to the regular agenda.
Okay. So in 3 weeks from now, which is gonna be the second meeting in April, we're gonna, that's the time frame to have a public hearing?
Because we have extra.
I know next week. Is that when we would discuss like, I looked at some of these budget numbers on phase one. That's when we get into how we're gonna have the CDD plans on paying themselves back or paying the bondholders back? Thank you. No.
Got it? Motion to go back to the printed agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse, second by Mr. Lobel. Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Talbert.
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse.
Yes.
Mr. Ard.
Yes.
Mr. Mack.
Yes.
Mr. Averett.
Yes.
Mr. Lobel.
Yes.
Mr. Wascom.
Yes. Item 12B. This particular item is an adoption of a resolution to declare notice of intent to create the Livingston Parish Airport District and set a public hearing. I've asked that this be put on the agenda, but Mr. Ricks probably wants to explain a little bit more about this.
Well, all you're doing now is offering a resolution giving me the authority to advertise the notice of intent. We have to do that 4 times. That has to run 4 different times. At that point, then come back, you all will be discussing in what manner you want us to create it and those kind of things, but we have to advertise 4 different times, just the notice of intent. So I'm asking for a resolution authorizing me to advertise the notice of intent, not to create it, but the notice of
You need to
intent.
read it real quick.
And in artist form, we need to read it.
Nope. It's a resolution, but the law says you have to
Has to be
read
read.
the intent in a public meeting and then advertise 4
Thank you,
consecutive
Ms.
weeks. Real fast, I'll speed read it. This is a resolution giving notice of intent of the Livingston Parish to create the Livingston Parish Airport District and ordering publication of said notice in accordance with the requirements of Louisiana Revised Statute 2313 et sequential. Whereas the revised statute authorizes the governing authority of the parishes to create airport districts, and whereas it provides the method for giving notice of intent to create the airport district, and whereas the Livingston Parish Council, governing authority of the parish of Livingston, desires to create the Livingston Parish Airport District in accordance with the provisions of law. Now therefore be it resolved by the Livingston Parish Council that notice is hereby given of its intent to create the Livingston Parish Airport District to be comprised of all that territory located within the boundaries of Livingston Parish outside unincorporated areas of the parish. Be it further resolved by the Livingston Parish Council that a public hearing shall be held at 6 p.m. on Thursday, May the 12th, in the council chambers located in 20355 Government Boulevard, Livingston, Louisiana, at which time the council will hear comments and, if it determines to create the airport district within the parish, shall adopt the resolution fixing the boundaries of the district and giving it a numerical designation and name.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Ms. Sandy. A motion to adopt a resolution to authorize parish president to advertise an intent to create a Livingston Parish Airport District. Motion by Mr. Bubba Harris. Second by Mr. Shane Mack. I would like for y'all to know I'm really excited about this. I've met with, and I think most of us have, we've met with some people that are really spearheading this. This will be great for Livingston Parish to help bring in small jets, propellers, airplanes, and in case of disasters and emergencies, we can evacuate certain areas from the lower parts of Louisiana to Livingston, or maybe Livingston needs to be under emergencies evacuated out. It's really being proactive, so I'm excited about this, and I believe we have a motion and a second, and no discussion. Any discussion? Call for the vote, Ms. Sandy.
Mr. Talbert.
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse.
Yes.
Mr. Ard.
Yes.
Mr. Mack.
Yes.
Mr. Averett.
Yes.
Mr. Lobel.
Yes.
Mr. Wascom.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Real quick, just want to compliment you all for your help during the storm that we had with all the water that we've dealt with, keeping your constituents informed, keeping us informed of the constituents' needs of when y'all were getting calls. We put out over 2,000 tons of sand, over 100,000+ sandbags. DPW had 14 workers round the clock for 3 days. Mark Howard Homeland Security, we operated OEP Center for 3 days, I think 3 or 4 days, round the clock. We had a lot of volunteers, Sheriff's Department, Red Cross, National Guard came in, and many volunteers that helped, fire districts, firemen, police. It was just a great effort with a lot of water, but I think at the end of the day, they all did a fantastic job. But compliments to you for the way y'all handled it and helped us get on top of what your needs were. We appreciate it very much.
It was amazing in my area to see how the people just came together, man. Just people jumped in and worked, I mean, literally around the clock.
They really do, and you know your mother-in-law had water, and you know what you personally went through while you're dealing with all of these other things, and people really do. We get calls, please get these big vehicles out of there, they're throwing water on us, and we say, well, what do we do with the lady on the other side of you that are calling and asking us to please bring these big vehicles in and get me out of this water? So you're dealing with all of the emotions, everybody's upset, everybody's tired, they're wore out, and it just, I thought you all did a fantastic job, especially being in this thing 2.5 months.
You got sand
So
in your pants,
everywhere you can possibly have it.
Those guys south of the interstate especially, those
Thank you,
guys stepped up.
Hold on, I asked Mr. Taylor to come up.
My name's Jeff, y'all know me. I want to follow that up. I called John a week ago, Mr. Wascom, a week or so ago, and look, my guys were out, looking at property, because that's what we have to do when they flood, and we have to see about the reassessment. I want to commend y'all on the work that y'all did as councilmen, but the people that work for the council that were out there with the trucks and the sand and the bagging and to make sure that people were safe and making sure that people went to our sheriff's department, our parish council, and Tab, like you said, it was amazing to watch as we went around there to see the camaraderie and the people that just stepped up and did what needed to be done. Just simply stepped up and did what needed to be done. I saw people carrying refrigerators and everything to higher places once the water started coming in. And I saw different churches show up at churches that needed to be picked up, and they thought they was going to flood, and other churches just showed up and started picking up. Your people did it. It was really nice. We've had some areas where we don't always in Livingston get the most positive of media coverage or people knowledge about us, but all of a sudden you saw anybody that knows anything about anything, you saw that when things got to going down, that Livingston Parish people come together. And I'm going to tell you now, I am extremely proud. I've always have been. I'm from here. I'm a lifelong resident here, but it's happening in Livingston Parish. And if you want to go somewhere where people take care of each other, you need to come to Livingston Parish. Thank y'all for y'all's help.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'd like to say one thing, if I could, please. Yes, sir. You'll have to excuse me.
There's no crying up here.
Yep, that's our bubble right here, y'all. That's the real bubble right there. Teddy bear.
That's all right.
The man in a green shirt.
Mr. Tableau Bell.
Nope.
No, Jeff.
Other green shirt. Mr. Jeff Avon, I'm sorry.
What color?
That's better.
He worked like you wouldn't believe.
He did. He did.
After I
And he
was
worked
relieved
us
in
like
my
you wouldn't
district
believe.
and didn't have any flooding there, I went to Port Benson and I watched him.
Yeah.
He worked and he brought everyone together.
He did.
Thank
He did.
Thank
He
you.
did.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And he did it like he's supposed to do it.
Right.
He didn't come up here and try to tell us how to do it. He called and said, can you help me? Can you get this? Can you do that? I've got a need here. I've got a need there. He handled it exactly how we asked that you guys handled it, because y'all are down here with your people. You're seeing it firsthand. All we need is the call to tell us. And we will get it done for you and with you in any way we can. But he went way above and beyond.
You right. You right.
He really did.
And I'd like to thank Mr. Leighton Ricks, our parish president, Mr. Mark Arrow, Huey works with y'all,
Those guys y'all had, y'all helped me out a lot, and I appreciate it.
That's what we're here for.
Y'all in a bad way down there.
We're all in it
Excuse me
together.
for the night, but some things just happen, you know.
That's okay.
Thank you.
We're gonna get you a clean up next time.
I need two of them.
We appreciate
Jeff,
you there, Bubba.
Jeff,
Item
we were
13.
talking about, we put our group around here, we go up against anybody on the planet, I think, just as far as pitching in, man, it's amazing to see.
Whoever you want to bring in, you can bring them far and wide, put Livingston Parish up against them. There is no match for the people of Livingston Parish.
You got it.
Thank you.
Jeff must have called me 4 times a day. What do you need me to do? Where do you need me now? What can I get you? He does it every storm, he really does.
Item 13, Mr. Mark Howell, Director. Let's pick up item A, a resolution authorizing the amendment of Old River Road Bridge Replacement Parish Project to include 19,000.
Yes, that's an ongoing project. We got to do a little bit of right-of-way acquisition to give a route around it and things, so.
You need a resolution authorizing the amendment? of the-
Yes, sir. I need one on all of them. I think you can do them all. I separated them out because the first one is a parish project. The rest of them in B are all a state project, off-system bridge. I just want to make sure you're aware that they're 2 different projects.
All B as it one?
You can do B together, yeah.
Okay, let's do A then.
Okay.
Jennifer,
Yes, sir.
money's in capital improvements in the DPW, or is it in the road repair line?
Maintenance of bridges.
Maintenance of bridges?
Yes, sir, because it's just a repair on that bridge, correct?
So,
If it's is it like a replacement, then it's in the capital improvements line.
Yeah, it's
so
a
it's in that $1
replacement.
million you got set aside in DPW, don't you have $1 million capital improvement, so that's where the money's at? Okay. The same, so I don't disturb you again, that's the same 4 on these other with the off-bridge, that's matched?
Yes, sir. The off-system bridge is recorded in the general fund because they're a grant. Old River is parish funds, not a grant.
So that's a capital out, that's coming out of the capital outlay at DPW.
Correct.
Now, the 4 grant, that comes through general fund, and that's in your budget, Mark?
That's a deal duty project, but she's going to fund it through the general fund.
Okay.
Motion to adopt the resolution for the Old River Road Bridge Replacement.
I'll make that.
Motion by Mr. Tadlow.
Second.
Second by Mr. Shane Mack. Those are in y'all's district,
Mine.
your district? All right, any discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. We'll take up item B, all 4 items at one time as a motion. Mark, did you have any reference to those, or you want to just read them off real quick?
Yeah, I'll say that one of them is in Mr. Girlinghouse District, and then the other 3, George Michon, John Barber, and P. Ridge, would be in Mr. Mack's district, just so you're aware of that. And it's the same thing we're trying to do.
Okay, is there a motion?
And they really need to be replaced.
And I think you're excited about that,
Yeah.
huh? We'll get those bridges replaced, and I know it's exciting to have a new bridge. I know that.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse, second by Mr. Shane Mack.
That's right.
I know, any discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
All right, number C is our debris and monitoring services. Did an RFP, scored those, and we've got Whit O'Brien for the monitoring and series for the cleanup. Now, the only thing different is on the bottom it says for a 4-year term. That's what the plan was and with the last group, because we're trying to keep it from the beginning to the end of your term. I messed that one up and forgot to change it to 4-year. So it's going to be a 1-year with 2 1-year extensions. And just be prepared, I'm going to probably come back on that 3rd year and ask you to extend it another year like we did last time and try to correct my mistake on the next go-around.
Now,
And what I'm
Mark,
asking,
the rollovers are automatic on year 2 and 3?
I'll come to you every year.
Okay.
Okay.
So what do you need,
I need a resolution approving the contracts for award, and also one to authorize the parish president to sign the contracts.
should we do them both at the same time, Chris?
I think we can vote.
to combine the two, both in a resolution form. Is there a motion from the board?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse, second by Mr. Bubba Harris. Call for the vote. Ms. Ann.
Who are the companies again?
Series, it should be on your sheet. Series is doing the cleanup, and Whit O'Brien
Okay.
is doing the monitoring.
Okay. Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
And did we do both of them at once?
Yes.
Item, yes.
And D is just, I'd like a resolution proclaiming April.
Wait, do we authorize the president to sign?
It was combined in that.
And all three items are combined?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, that's all right. And D is, I'm asking for a resolution proclaiming April 2016 as Fair Housing Month. I need a resolution so I can put it in my files. It's a HUD requirement, come every year asking for this.
Motion from the board.
I'm making a motion.
Motion by Mr. Jeff Averett, second by Mr. Shane Mack. Call for the vote.
Who made the second?
Mr.
Shane.
Shane Mack.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Howard.
and I want to add something. Everybody was bragging on different ones up here. If you have a chance, you're in the Springfield area, and you go by the AmVets building, you're going to see the DSNAP location. I just want to say that this is the first year that the parish has handled the security all on its own. Usually the sheriff's office takes the biggest portion of the burden, but this year we've had Albany, Denham Springs, Walker, Killian, French Settlement, all sending units. We didn't ask for a guard, didn't have to ask for state police, nothing. So even some of the municipalities that weren't affected send units out all week, so.
Did you say Hamfest building?
AmVet,
Oh,
AmVet,
AmVet.
at the corner of 42 and 43.
Thank you.
They've done a great job, so when you talk to the mayors, the chiefs, just give them a
Thank you.
thumbs
All
up.
right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank y'all.
14, Department of Public Works Directors, Mr. Sam DiGirolamo, resolution, I guess to start, accepting the 2016 updated road priority list.
Yes, sir. As you well know, we are coming closer to the end of Phase 1. We've got still a little bit left to do. We're fixing to start Phase 2 here just shortly. So at this time, I think we've got an engineer, Mr. Billy Taylor, is in here to kind of go over you with the priority road list to present this second phase to you for adoption. Mr. Billy?
I believe all y'all have this sheet we send out. I know we talked about this the past few meetings, but I'll just kind of be brief on it. We took the existing priority list and went and marked off the ones that have already been done, and took the ones that were left and some of the ones that y'all brought up, and we went and scored those roads based on several criteria. We came up with a priority score list and ranked those for you. And I think on page 3 we have a recommended 2016 program, and basically I met with Mr. Sam many times, talked to most of the councilmen on the phone, met with several of y'all in person, went over this list, and we're basically just taking the ones that scored the highest and going down the list. Every now and then we would, if something's not in the budget, we might have to skip over it. But anyway, we just like to ask for the resolution to approve this list and to allow us to proceed with capital outlay for 2016. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Fantastic presentation, so thank you very much. So there's a motion from the board to accept the road list.
I'll take it, I'll take that one. We got several on there.
Got several on there, thank you, Mr.
I'll second even though I don't have any.
And you don't have none on there, Paul, we're working together. Any discussion? Motion by Mr. Lobel, second by Mr. Talbot. Call for the roll, Ms. Sandy.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Hey, John, there's just a couple comments. There's some things that you'll notice that if you look at the information you were given, you'll find out that, like, there are some roads on here that the way they're structured, they're gonna be hard to get done unless we create a situation where we limit the amount of a road that can take a percentage of your total budget so that we can break that out. Because as an example, South Satsuma is a road that would have consumed the whole year budget, to fix that one road. And so when you get to it being number, 11 on the list, there's no money available at that point in time to do any work on it.
Right, or if you did it first, there wouldn't be any.
If you did it, if it had been the worst road, then it would have been the only road. So we probably need to, before we visit this again, create, and we can create the rules. Am I correct? If we want to limit 25% of the budget to a particular road, that road will start getting some work. But some roads that are going to be very expensive to repair will never get repaired under the current format that we're working. If you'll look, we started road 1 and went down the list, and then when you hit a road that didn't have any money, it got jumped, and the roads were treated straight according to need. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Billy and Sam, it's all according to need. And so we're gonna have to make we're gonna have to create some rules, or we're gonna have roads that never get fixed. So that's just something that we need to consider before we implement next year's plan, to create some rules that might, give the engineer the ability to address part of a road. Am I correct in saying that, Bill?
Maybe we just need to get some more money in the road overlay
Well, I
program.
Didn't y'all have one, or don't you have one in y'all's district?
Well,
That they went in and done one end?
Well, I
Like
mean,
the back
Well, they
end?
did in mine, Dunn
Yeah.
Road.
Well, we
Yeah.
got-
And you can't go back out because the roads, what they say is in good enough shape, but you only got a half a road, basically. That's what it
We got a
amounts
little
to.
piece of a road.
Well,
But
yeah.
Mr.
I
Taylor.
travel that road all the time, and the part that they did was the most heavily traveled worst part of that road. Now, the north end of Dunn Road is gonna need addressing before 5 years from now. But as this parish grows, we're gonna have more funds for this, and the parish president is on board to get us more funds, and that's a good thing. And it'll happen.
And Scooter, just to add to what-
He's already gone.
just to add a little bit to your conversation, Dunn Road is on a different type of
It's
money
on the
thing.
MPO.
We're gonna
Right,
do
it's
Dunn
because
Road
it's a
with
big-
Some
yeah.
MPO money, so.
We may get to that
Yes,
before.
we might get to that soon.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna point out to you. On this page 3,
Yeah, I
where we have
saw it.
recommendations, we got a list of roads that are on the NPO list, because that's a different set of money that's already been
Is
allocated.
that
for
time
those
frame a
roads.
hard time frame? I know it says 36 months on there, but is that a,
Well, I'm not involved with that. It's a
Because
different
it comes from
program that
state.
goes through Mr. Sam and the parish.
if it says 36 months, that's more than likely when they're gonna do it.
That's what we hope to do. That's what we hope to do.
So we put that on there just so y'all would know when somebody asks you, hey, why aren't we doing Dunn Road? Hey, it's already gonna be done, they got money allocated from it, for the state. I think, Mr. Gary, to answer your question, yes, there would help to have some guidelines like that. I think you can get a lot more done on some.
Well, I just know it's like the lowest 3 scheduled roads on here are all gravel.
Mr. Taylor, do you think you could put together some ideas or some proposals on, or percentage or something like that, and get with us? Because I think Gary had a great idea.
No, I
If
totally
you'll
agree,
make
and
that
there's
part
a
of
few
the,
other things we discussed, and, but by the time we get to scoring the next roads, we'd be happy to have those in place by then.
And you will know the ones that need the most need, so you can kind of pull that section out and say, we gotta get this section done. I don't have a chart.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
15. We've already.
So we've already done it.
Yeah, the
We're on
question was after.
15A.
All right.
15A, Mr. Sam Servitude, revocation for the Thompson Estate Family Partition.
I think Ms. Sandy's gonna get this.
This will be an introduction of an ordinance. This will be proposed ordinance 16-10. This is an ordinance revoking the dedication and abandoning of a quitclaim in favor of the landowners of the 50-foot servitude of passage across a certain tract of land formerly the Thompson properties, located in section 10 TS 6R6E, Livingston Parish, Indiana, and more particularly described herein. The public hearing will be held on April the 14th at 6 p.m.
All right, motion to adopt introduction of this ordinance.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Grogas, thank you, Trustee Tracy. Second by Mr. Jeff Avery. Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. 16 Planning Commission recommendations, I think A, we've taken care of already.
Right.
So let's go to B, Juvenile Trails filing. Do we need to do that as well?
This is a subdivision, Mr. Chair, with improvements, Juvenile Trails first filing. It's in Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse's district. It's the first filing of this subdivision off the Buddy Ellis Road. It is a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the preliminary plat for Juvenile Trails first filing.
Motion by Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse to accept the planning's recommendation to approve the plat, second by Mr. Jeff Ard. Any discussion, call for the vote?
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard? Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel? Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Next, Mr. Chairman, is Fairlane Farms revised preliminary plat. This is in Mr. Scooter's area. It's a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the revised preliminary plat for Fairlane Farms, contingent on the note in the common area be removed from track CA4. And
Mr. King, that's in your district, you make the motion?
that's just a little common area. They had it noted as, Scooter, if you'll see in the back of that lot. They just would rather that be taken off as a common area.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's something that came up
Just
after they
language.
went back through planning?
Yes, it did. That's-
Okay,
yes, it did.
Okay.
That was
Yeah,
what-
I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
Motion by Mr. King, is there a second? By Mr. Girlinghouse. Any discussion, call for the vote?
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
I think that's it.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Sam. Item 17, we've taken care of already. Item 18, board appointments or reappointments. A, Gravity Drainage District, Mr. Tab Lobel. Let's give him the floor on this one.
We're getting our gravity drainage going, just very preliminary. It'll be a corporate deal between me and Jeff and Shane, and we're making some board appointments. And so tonight I want my first board appointment to be Mr. Larry O'Neill.
Mr. Larry? All right, is there a motion from the board? We got a motion from Mr. Tab,
Yeah.
I'll make it.
seconded by Mr. Jeff Averett. Call for the vote?
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. The second person to have the floor, Mr. Averett, did you have someone?
Yes, my second appointment is gonna be Mr. Charles McCon.
Is he in the audience tonight?
No, he's not in the audience
Okay.
tonight. I give the resume to Sandy.
That's fine. Motion by Mr. Jeff Averett, seconded by Mr. Shane Mack.
Right.
Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Item B is Planning Commission, Mr. R.C. Bubba Harris. Do you
Yes,
have the
sir.
floor on this one?
Yes, sir. This is actually a, I guess you could say, a re-appointment. And the name is Mike Reed.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Harris to reappoint Mike Reed for his Planning Commission district.
I'll second.
Correct.
Seconded by Mr. Gary Talbert. Motion by Mr. Harris. Discussion. Call for the vote.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Mr. Jeff Averett, you have the floor for Planning Commission.
Yes, I have a reappointment also, Mr. Kenny Morrison.
Kenny Morrison.
He's not in the audience.
All right, motion by Mr. Jeff Averett, seconded by Mr. Harris. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Recreation District Number 3, There's a gentleman that's been on the Parks and Recreation Board for years, serves us very well, and I work with him very closely on the Denham Springs City Council, Mr. Arthur Perkins. He's asked me to serve another term, so I'd like to make a recommendation that we appoint this term.
Absolutely.
Motion, I need a motion, and
I'll second.
motion by Mr.
Scooter said.
No, Gary.
All right, Gary made the motion, and Jeff,
Yeah.
please. Gary makes the motion,
I'm gonna second.
and Jeff Averett second. Call for the vote.
Okay, Mr. Gary
Gary
Talbot made the motion.
And Mr. Jeff Averett.
Averett, second, okay. Mr. Talbot,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse,
Yes.
Mr. Ard,
Yes.
Mr. Mack,
Yes.
Mr. Averett,
Yes.
Mr. Liddell, Mr. Wascom.
Yes. This next item is to adopt a resolution to address the vacancy of Ward 7 Council District 5 Constable and the appointment of a replacement, Mr. R.C. Bubba Harris. This is a little bit intertwined. You want to,
I think Miss Sandy
Miss
has
Sandy's gonna
a
talk a little
letter
bit about
that
this
she would
one.
like to read concerning this.
Yes, sir. Because our March 10th meeting had to be canceled because of the dangerous weather conditions, we had this on that agenda. And you only have, the state law mandates, you only have 20 days to appoint somebody from the time of their death. And we made that 20 days. However, when everybody came back to work that Monday, that was our 20th day, and we couldn't call a meeting to make the open meetings law. So we wrote a letter to the Secretary of State's office and told them in detail what had happened and asked if they could please waive the law of the 20 days because of the flooding and we couldn't meet that time. So they sent it up the chain of command and they said, we're sorry, the governor will have to make the appointment, but they always work with whoever the governing authority recommends.
but I
So-
think it would be of utmost importance and a good faith gesture on this council if we support Mr. Bubba Harris and make a motion adopting a resolution asking the governor's office to appoint his recommendation. So,
Who's your recommendation, Bo?
His name is, Sandy's got it right there.
Thank
Good friend of yours? It's, Thomas, yeah.
I forget it too, I say it.
That's terrible.
Thomas Shane,
sorry, Bubba.
Thomas Shane Reagan.
Okay.
Yes.
Would that be
I'll make
okay?
a motion with a resolution asking the governor to support Mr. Harris's nomination.
And she'll write the letter, I believe, and send it to the governor's office.
Mr. Shane Ray?
Yeah, I could have looked it up in my phone, but I didn't want to turn it on. I've got it all
We
here.
had a motion by Mr. Talbot, seconded by
I'll second it.
Jeff Favorite. Call for the vote, Ms. Sandy.
I just want to say he does meet all the legal mandates to be constable.
Okay, great.
Mr. Reagan.
Great,
Okay.
great.
Mr. Talbot,
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yeah.
Mr. Garlinghouse.
Yes.
Mr. Ard.
Yes.
Mr. Mack,
Yes.
Mr. Averett,
Yes.
Mr. Liddell,
Yes.
Mr. Wascom.
Yes, I would like to say something right here. It's a great time to say this. I'm just honored, and I'm not trying to pat nobody on the back, no, but Mr. Harris, I want you to know it is an honor to serve on here with you, and I want to say thank you for fixing a great meal for this council.
Absolutely.
I just want you to know, this guy
Absolutely.
works tirelessly to help everybody, so I
That
just want
was Miss Kathy, so.
well.
We'll thank Miss Kathy then.
I know, thank you so much. Next item, 20 got taken care of already. 21, an introduction of an ordinance to amend the home rule charter as it relates to term limits. I got two names here, Chris Moody and Mr. Gary Talbot.
We're gonna push this back to the next meeting because we're still working on the ordinance. How about that?
Oh, I can't believe it. All right, we're gonna
Bless your heart, I'm ready.
I think we gotta look to-
motion from that item from the agenda.
The water took care of that ordinance.
Item 22
Washed it away.
That's something you put on the.
is to adopt a resolution of support. These items were requested, I believe, by Mr. Shane Mack and Mr. Tab Lobel. Item A is a school district number 24 bond. You want to talk about it, or?
Yeah, we're gonna be voting on a millage increase in the Albany School District area, District 24. I think early voting is this coming Saturday, and the election is April the 9th. And I know it's a tough decision for the people of that district, but I'd just like to say I'm in support of this because I believe that we need to fund the school systems and provide some good schools, good buildings, a gym out there in the Albany area for those junior high kids to go to school. And I'm asking the council to adopt a resolution in support of that millage increase so we can improve our school systems out in the Albany area.
All right, and who's got 27? with
That's
this?
me, yeah.
You want to ditto exactly what he said? or-
You know what he said, and, it's a tough thing to do. It's nobody likes paying taxes. But this tax, you get to see where it goes. It's paid by the local people, and it stays in the local community. And, you can pass by there and you can say, we built that.
Great.
So,
Okay, a motion by Mr. Tableau Bell, seconded by Mr. Shane Mack.
That's right.
To adopt a resolution supporting this tax coming up on April the 9th.
Both of them.
Both these taxes, both
Right.
in two different school districts, correct?
that's right.
And I can tell you, as a resident of Watson, we did the same thing. We got a brand new high school out there. It's an amazing facility. And it's a benefit to the whole community. It's a benefit to our parish. One thing that's driving the growth of this parish is the education system that we offer here. And so anything we can do to support the education system within Livingston Parish, we as a council need to take forward, take the time and promote that institution and the betterment of that institution. And if it requires raising taxes to build a new facility, then we as a council need to do that, so.
Well, I appreciate y'all's support.
You know,
Mr. Man, you want to call for the vote?
it works.
I'm sorry.
New
discussion?
facilities really work. It instills a lot of community pride,
Thank
you know,
Amen.
really does.
Go ahead and call for the vote, please.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Garlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Finance Committee recommendations, I know y'all just had one. I'm gonna turn this over to Mr. Talbert. You want to run through these real quick?
These recommendations actually were like from 2 weeks ago. Item 1, there is a contract that we need to authorize the parish president to sign for LaPorte. LaPorte has done the parish audit for the last 2 years, am I correct? This will be the 3rd year of their, initial RFP. Now, the old council couldn't do it because it was gonna overlap the term, but they needed to be in place the first of the year. So, we need, the recommendation is that we need to approve a resolution authorizing the parish president to sign that contract with LaPorte. And then we need to plan on, before the end of the year, doing a set of RFPs in the finance committee for an auditor. And it might be LaPorte again, but we need to, do another set of RFPs to have them, make presentations. And
We usually do
then,
that in
man,
October.
okay.
So there's no action tonight. as far
Yeah,
as-
we need to approve,
For
we
this.
need to make a motion to approve a resolution authorizing the parish president to sign the contract.
Okay.
With the
Pardon?
With the
With LaPorte.
With the auditor. Motion by Mr. Talbot,
I'll make the motion.
second by Mr. King.
Can I
Nope.
say something?
Sure.
This will actually be ratifying the parish president's signature. He's already signed the contract, so we're just ratifying that.
He had to do it before the first
We're
of the year.
adopting a resolution ratifying the audit engagement letter signed by
Okay.
parish president Lakeman.
All right,
That's
motion.
the way I made my motion,
All
exactly
right,
the way
motion
you
by
read it.
Mr. Talbot, you heard that, second by Mr. King. In discussion, call for the vote.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Garlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Item B, the LEDC came before the budget committee, 2 weeks ago, requesting a one-time $50,000 payment, on a program that they currently have in place. We had, over the previous 5 years, spent $50,000 a year to support the LEDC and the work they've done within the parish. We were assured by Ms. Myers that the money was in place, it wouldn't be an issue, and we had support from the administration, so we'd like a resolution to create a one-time budget allocation of $50,000 to the LEDC for the program 2016 Livingston Tomorrow.
Motion by Mr. Talbot,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Garlinghouse. In discussion, call for the vote.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Coastal Coalition,
The third item is a resolution of support to dissolve the Coastal Coalition. Livingston Parish has been a member of this Coastal Coalition for some time. They've had no action. We sent a request, Ms. Myers, by the current, was it Terrebonne Parish? Vermilion Parish that is currently in charge of the Coastal Coalition, and request that we submit to show support for the dissolution of it. So we'd like to make a motion for a resolution of support to
Motion.
dissolve the Coastal Coalition.
motion by Mr. Talbot to dissolve the Coastal Coalition, seconded by Mr. Harris. Any discussion, call for the vote?
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Item D is a resolution to increase the Livingston Parish Office of Motor Vehicles transaction fee to $4.50 and authorize the parish president to sign an agreement with the Department of Public Safety. State law has allowed that the fee be raised to $4.50. We currently have a shortfall in that sinking fund, is that my understanding? We could actually get by with a smaller raise, but it wouldn't allow any extras, and we would probably have a shortfall again next year. So we're gonna go ahead and make a resolution to increase the fee, the Livingston Parish Office of Motor Vehicle Transaction fee to $4.50, and authorize the parish president to sign an agreement with the Department of Public Safety.
And how much is it going up, Ms. Jennifer?
It's $3 right now.
So it'll go up $1.50, and that's for,
Per transaction.
like, inspection, driver's license renewal?
Utilities, maintenance,
No,
all that stuff.
I meant on the front
Oh, yeah.
side.
Yeah.
For driver's license or any type of title, okay, $1.50. Is there a motion by Mr. Talbot and from the Finance Committee, second by Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse, in discussion, call for the vote?
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Item E is not relevant at this point in time. Purchase order's already been issued and the recorder's already been bought. So,
Okay, thank you. And I would like to say, I really appreciate the Finance Committee's hard work. I tell you, I am not even questioning we've got the right group of guys serving on this Finance Committee. Thank you very much, Gary, for all your hard work. Item 24, the Ordinance Committee recommendations, I believe we pulled that, Mr. Shane Mack?
Yeah, but I got something to say about that.
Well, you go right ahead.
wait a minute, don't say much. Because I done told all the people from Oak Hills it wasn't on the agenda tonight.
No, I just wanted to say we had an ordinance committee meeting this past Tuesday night. It was very lengthy and very educational, and we realized that the modifications we had wasn't quite right, so we took a step back, and what we're going to do, so the public knows, is we're going to have a meeting on April the 5th at 6:30, and we're inviting all who is concerned and to come to that meeting, and we think we're going to get it right soon.
Here.
So we would like to actually, do we need a resolution or a motion to table it to the next meeting? Okay.
We'll just strike it.
Pull it.
Okay, with your permission?
Yeah.
It's done. Item 25, District Attorney, Mr. Chris Moon.
This is something that actually Sandy caught when we had changed previous ordinance after it had been introduced. Remember, we removed one of the pieces of equipment. We didn't quite follow your own rules about it, so what we need to do is, what do we decide we need to do?
We all got that today.
Ordinance, can I speak? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Ordinance 16-01, y'all had asked to remove a piece of equipment and possibly have a cooperative endeavor agreement with, I believe, a fire district to give them that.
Gravity 6.
Gravity, okay. So what was needed to be done is y'all need to amend the ordinance by removing that piece of property off of the ordinance, vote on it, but you're amending it, and then vote again to adopt it as amended.
Right.
That's the language.
So help me on the first motion, to amend an ordinance?
Correct.
Amend 1601, removing that piece of equipment.
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Talbot, second by Mr. Lobel. Any discussion, call for the vote.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel? Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Now
Now,
to
motion to read, adopt LP
Adopt.
1601.
Motion to adopt.
As amended.
I'll make the motion
Motion
to
by Mr.
re-adopt.
Talbot, second by Mr. Ard. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack? Mr. Averett? Mr. Lobel? Mr. Wascom?
One more thing. Mr. Talbot was very gracious. I wanted to take responsibility for the home rule charter thing not being ready tonight. Last time the home rule charter was done, our bond counsel prepared the ordinance. I just assumed that would happen this time. I get here tonight, she says, "Well, you have the ordinance," and I assumed that she'd given it to Sandy. So there's a little breakdown in communication. We will make sure that's done for the next meeting.
No problem.
And
All right.
adopt it
Hey.
well in advance of the election date.
Well, that's the main thing, just so we can get the election done. Get it in.
Mr. Harris?
Yes, I know I'm a big teddy bear,
You are.
and I'm sorry,
That's
but,
okay.
when you see somebody working like that, it makes you appreciate the people you're with.
You talking about Mr. Jeff Avery again?
Yes.
Okay, good. But I would like.
enough use of
Hey, I want to say one thing before you go ahead and say what you got to say, John.
Give out, Jeff?
Korea Baptist Church, and actually it was Dale and Collins Week. They do the annual Korea Jambalaya cook-off every year. Well, because of the Clemson Council. But some of those guys that cook, plan to cook, they all got together at the old church. And I think we ended up with having about 700 plates that we delivered out to the community. And then, I think that was Friday and Saturday, we got together with some of the folks in Fort Vincent, with Mr. Bubba and Shane and Sherman. Got a jambalaya cooked down there and delivered to all people in that area. So it worked out real good. And I'd like to thank all of y'all for helping. Appreciate it.
We went, I was Scooter Road, but Scooter and I rode by there Saturday. It was amazing to watch at the old church across. That's the church across where South Satsuma or whatever that is,
42.
comes in 42.
Yes.
The people there, and then the pickup trucks that would back up, and they were stacking those white styrofoam containers in there with jambalaya, and they were going, and then Jeff would send you, he'd be at some intersection in some little boat, and I passed through in a car last week, and they out there in a boat going to people's house delivering food. It was amazing to watch.
That's country boys, son. That's how you do it.
I would have to, like to say one more thing before we adjourn. We haven't had a meeting as a Livingston Parish Council since the death of Mr. Mike Doty. And I would like to say, Mr. John, I want you to know, I believe you're going to do a great job of stepping up. And, you know, I can tell you, I know I'm going to miss the articles, the time, the care that he did for the newspaper and he did for this parish. So, do you? Do you? So tell him.
Y'all do. I
Please
know you do.
Send the message that we're concerned. If the parish can do anything, let us know. And we really have faith and trust that you're going to step up and do the job. So thanks again so much. And our prayers will be with you.
Thank you, John.
Motion to adjourn is in order.
Yeah.
By Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse, seconded by Mr. Scooter King. Jeff Vard?
I'm not ready to go home. We can stay all night.
Seconded by Mr. Jeff Vard. Let's go home.
Mr. Talbot?
Oh, yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thought it would be 2.5